Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the February 19th, 2024 special Troy City Council meeting. I will call the meeting to order and ask the roll call for Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Brooks?
Here.
Councilmember Chamberlain Crainga?
Here.
Councilmember Chanda?
Here.
Councilmember Gunn?
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Here.
Councilmember Holdridge?
Here.
All present this evening. I don't see that anybody is here to sign up or here to speak for public comment. So we'll move right into the business stated in the special meeting notice. We have one item tonight. D1 is a presentation discussion on a special assessment procedure, and I will turn it over to City Manager Miller to get this ball going.
Thank you. I'm just going to make quick, short comments and turn this over to Meg Schubert, Assistant City Manager. What we have here is kind of a classic example of we've always done it this way, and there is not a lot of rules and policies regarding this. And in comparison, and Kelly will show you a comparison in the research that Meg has done, that there are other ways where there is more participatory costs involved. And we just want to make sure that we get our policy right and adopt the necessary ordinances if we need to do that. With that, I'll turn it over to Meg.
Absolutely. So tonight we're going to be looking at the procedure in general, taking a quick look at what we currently have in Troy, and then we did some research and kind of look at what we found in other communities. In the city, we have 3.3 miles of gravel roads. We have 267.5 miles of paved local roads. Our current special assessment district procedures are established in our charter, in our code, and the actual administration is laid out in two ad memos that we have here. For the most part, these have not been updated since 1978. So the cost of paving has changed. A lot has changed since then, leaving our current procedures outdated and incomplete. Comparative research was done with 9 communities. The communities were chosen based on similar population, tax base, location, and we looked at 3 important aspects of everyone's procedure, and that can be broken down into the petitions for improvement and the amount of support that's needed to move a petition through, the cost share between the city and the residents, and the installments and interest charges of the assessment. Petitions for improvements. This is what we use to determine if there is property owner support. So our current policy is laid out in the charter and in an ad memo. And it states that 50% of property owners in the affected area qualify as general interest, so less than a majority. When we looked at other communities, this is very uncommon. Almost every other community has established either a majority or a supermajority before they would say that there is general interest. So most communities require at least 51%. Rochester Hills and Southfield require 60%. Staff is recommending that at least 60% is established by ordinance, and that 60% would be calculated by the proportion of frontage in the effective area and not the parcels themselves. The next important aspect of these administrative policies is what proportion of the cost the city would absorb and versus the resident. So the city charter states that the council shall designate what part of the cost shall be made by the assessment upon the property owners especially benefited, and what part should be paid from city funds. Currently, we do not have any policies that outline that. So neither the charter or the code establish that. We have a precedent that we've always sort of used to rely on these special assessment districts in the past, but most communities do establish that based on a case-by-case basis. However, when we were doing our research, some of the cities that we would think had really strong administrative policies, such as Rochester Hills and Royal Oak, they do identify that up front. So Rochester Hills will pay for 40% and Royal Oak for 50%. Staff is looking for some direction and recommends that we establish a cost sharing between 40 and 50%. The next is actually two factors that really go hand in hand depending on how you look at the policy. So we have installments and interest charges. When we look at installments, the charter states that council shall have the right to provide for the payment of special assessments in installments, and that the installments would be annual, but it doesn't establish a specific number of annual installments. Most communities limit the term of installments to 20 years, and that is to ensure that the term is less than the useful life of the public improvement. So staff recommends that council considering establishing a term that would follow that. That would be less than the term of the useful life of the public improvement, but limit it to 20 years. Interest charges on the property. This charter does state that council has the right to collect interest charges with the respect to the unpaid installments. No comparable communities establish a specific interest rate except for Troy right now. We have established that there's a 6% interest rate. Most communities are doing this on a case-by-case basis depending on how the improvement will be financed. So Farmington Hills and Rochester Hills set an interest rate at 1% greater than the interest on the bonds issued for the special assessment. Historically speaking in Troy, we have not issued bonds for special assessments. However, it does look like that's a pretty common practice in most other communities, and staff does recommend investigating this option to see what that would look like moving forward with any future special assessments. So that's the end of our presentation here. It's really these three main factors that would help us administer any future special assessments with a little bit more clarity.
Thank you. Off the bat, I meant to say before I turn it over to Mark, but thank you for, one, getting this on our calendar right away. I mean, I appreciate that. I know that our residents who are affected by this appreciate it, and to Councilmember Brooks and Councilmember Chamberlain Crango, have had a lot of interaction with Mr. Fagan and Middlesex State, and I know we've all had our conversations with the folks in that neighborhood, or most of us have at this point. But I appreciate city management getting this back for us to deal with, and I know you've done some research and work on it before, which made it a little easier to do it right away. So that's my thank you for that. I have some questions, I'm sure others have some questions. Just so the memo was pretty clear, the presentation was pretty clear. You're basically looking for direction from us on one, do we want to make a change to what we have in place now? You recommend we clearly need to in some areas, but then a little further if possible, what that might look like, I'm guessing, is what we do. I have some thoughts and everything, but questions to start out? Go ahead, Councilmember Gunn.
You mentioned bonds. Did you look at other communities and what kind of interest rate do they offer those bonds?
Yeah, so we did look at the interest rate in the 9 comparable communities. It is common for other communities to issue bonds for these, and the most common language that we see, like in Farmington Hills and Rochester Hills, was to set the interest rate 1% higher than 1% greater than the interest on the bonds.
Okay.
So really case by case there.
I have a question about, so one of the reasons why we were hesitant to, follow through with some of the residents was that once they're locked into these installments, right, they can't, even if they move, you put a lien on their house and all of those kinds of things. So they'd be locked into these payments for 20 years as it.
Well, it would just, if they were to sell their property or move, it would have to be paid off before, yes.
At closing.
But,
I
yes.
think Kelly can talk about that, but that's state law. So there's really no way around
You
that.
can't carry over an installment agreement to a new homeowner, right?
Right.
The special assessment district can be paid though in full, without installments. They can, so that they are not charged interest. Right.
Full amount.
They can pay it in full the first year when it becomes a lien.
Let me take a step back on a question. I seem to remember, is there an existing city policy that our goal is to pave all unpaved roads in the city? Or is that something I've made up in my, I feel like at a time I was told, perhaps 8 years ago when we dealt with this, that the goal of the city was to pave unpaved roads, and that's what we've been working towards. Does that ring a bell to anybody else, or am I?
I've heard it said before, but I don't know if it's official policy.
Me too.
Yeah, there were memos from the early 70s, and it's kind of how you got to the ad numbers in the 78s, you know, that were about 90. You know.
Might have just been something from when the city was still developing from a farm town into what it is today. I mean, is that-
Exactly.
I just wasn't sure if there was something that we still, that's a policy we're driven by.
Well, maintaining a non-paved road is more expensive than having a paved road, so it would reduce maintenance costs by having a paved road.
I have another question, Mark, hold on one second. The cost proportion analysis that we use now, or we don't know what it is, or we use it on a case by case, because here's my question. If, for example, we wanted to say, all right, we as a city want to pave Middlesex, I'm using Middlesex because it's the biggest bulk left, right? We still we wouldn't just do that all on our own. We would still do a special assessment for the residents that are benefiting that, is that correct?
It is, but it is not defined in any of our policies what that cost share would be. And in the past in Troy, the residents have paid only for the cost of the paving, and the city has absorbed the rest. So when you look at Middlesex, that would be, you know, it's almost a $3 million project, and the city would be absorbing, I don't know, 2.5 million of that cost, somewhere in there.
The resident share is like 18% of that project, going along the way that we previously assessed where they're just paying for the asphalt.
And that's from an ad memo?
No, it's just a precedent.
Just a precedent. But so we could say, I'm cautiously throwing this out as an example, all right, we want to pave that and it's going to be $3 million. We'll pay half and we're going to assess your properties half, right? We have the
Yes.
ability to do that without changing the ordinance, without doing anything, and I'm not recommending that's what we do, but is that correct? I mean, it really is that we can just decide, or you decide?
Absolutely.
I think Kelly can speak to the state law about.
I believe you guys can do that with no petition from the owners.
Yeah.
That
you
I
could-
know we can do without
Yeah.
the.
Yes.
But the maximum that the city can charge is the value of the benefit, which
So
is.
that's another thing that has to be addressed. So petitioners that are on the paved road can go to the tax tribunal and protest that special assessment. We have to prove that the value that they're paying has been added to their property because now they're on a paved road. I mean, if you're talking $50,000 per homeowner in Middlesex that they have to pay, I highly doubt that they could get $50,000 more for their parcel on a paved road versus the dirt.
But if they initialize the petition, then that's not an issue.
No,
Or is it still even if
the remaining people that did not sign the petition and are not in favor of it, they will probably go to the tax tribunal to protest it.
Councilmember Gavin, did you have a question?
And this is kind of my real estate broker hat. Is it a policy from, here's a person that sells their house, now they have to pay off the assessment, yet the new owner still gets the benefit of that for another, say, 15, 18 years? Why is that? Like, is it a rule, policy?
State law.
State law.
Kelly
It's a
can
state law?
ask.
Yeah, it becomes a lien on the property the day the road and the special assessment roll is certified.
And theoretically, they've just sold that house for more because
yeah.
they increased the value of their house with the paved road
Right.
to back up the tax.
Got it, okay.
Well, it comes down to that, are you getting your money's worth in terms
Yeah.
of when you're selling it? So, is it like the number of people petitioning that 50% or 51%, that is also something that we can decide here?
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah, and we're recommending it's 51% based on frontage, so not by parcel, not all votes are equal, which is how the.
I thought you wanted 60%.
Yeah, it's 60.
60 or, yeah, more than 50.
But whatever the percentage is, it's based on frontage, which is how it would actually be assessed anyway. So once upon a time when there were subdivisions where they were all like 50-foot lots or whatever, it might have been okay to have one parcel, one vote, but in what's remaining, that's not the case.
Well, you also have the issue of corner lots.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we get twice the benefit.
No, I don't think we charge them double.
We
showed if it's by frontage,
Based
right?
on linear feet of frontage on the
The
road.
corner lots, the full amount?
Yep,
Okay, so-
and especially if the lot can be split, because then that would be another benefit also. So that has to be determined also when calculating the special assessment district.
Councilmember Chandler, can I get you a question?
You have one.
Oh.
Go ahead.
If you still have questions, go ahead, because I was just going to have more comments, I guess.
I'll ask
So-
the question. So I'm all for creating a little more clarity with all of this, but then the question is, a couple of things, the recommendation is a case-by-case basis. So in my head, I think I can understand why we'd want to do that, but I just wonder if someone could unpack that a little bit, because again, if we're trying to create more clarity, but then some things are case-by-case, I don't want to create something then residents like, oh, well, you're favoring this and not this, and so, yeah.
Well, I could talk a little bit about the installment and interest charges. That's gonna be a case-by-case basis, based on the life of the improvement. So if the road is expected to last for 20 years versus a different kind of road or improvement that would last for 10 years. So as a practical matter, since we're talking about 3.3 miles, it's probably not going to
We
vary.
have different types of road material on that, like, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes. So the intent is for there to be kind of parameters within which we're working, our city council is working, but not make those parameters so rigid that it wouldn't apply to all situations.
Because the other thing is, around the cost proportion, it states that a lot of other communities, it's a case-by-case basis. But you're suggesting that we set one standard, or that's something that we can decide? Or one percentage in terms of the proportion?
I think it needs to be a case-by-case basis in order to address what Kelly was talking about, and that's got to be defendable. But that a council could establish a ceiling or a maximum or a minimum, either way, to kind of set that expectation.
And just, again, added clarification could be that it's, the case by case is dependent upon the useful life of the improvement. Or you could add some language that would provide a little more clarity and objectivity.
I think we're fine to move into discussion.
Yeah,
Councilor Hamilton, if you want to go there.
Sure, yeah, I'll say where I'm at, when it comes to bonds or no bonds, I think if it's a big enough project, then bonds is a good option. If it's a $3.5 million project, that seems like a perfect opportunity to take advantage of our AAA bond rating and not tie up funds that are in other things. But if it's like, just a couple properties, then that's another story. I agree that we should do frontage, for sure. To me, that makes a lot more logical sense. I think, based on experience we've had with this in the past, I'm kind of debating between whether it's a 60% or a 67% threshold to make sure the residents are pretty. It's going to be a big tax hit. So make sure.
67% of the frontage?
Yeah, 60%, 7% of the frontage, or 60. Yeah, I'm like, those are kind of the two I'm debating with. And I kind of want to, I kind of want to see where council's at on that. I agree with charging an interest rate, because there's definitely administrative work we have to do to make this happen. As far as like, what percentage we would cover, that was a curveball to hear about the possible having to defend it at the tax tribunal. But I'm thinking if other communities do it, somewhere around 50% seems right, considering in the past we were 18%. I think going all the way to 40 might be more of a change from the precedent. So I think 50 as like the max we'll cover is pretty fair, but I'm open to hearing that. That's kind of where I am right now. I'm still debating the 60 versus 67%. That I'm on the fence on. The other things I feel pretty comfortable with.
Where does the 67 come from, 67%?
I mean, just in the past when we've
Oh,
had
yeah.
residents
Okay.
come,
Okay.
a lot of times you'd have like 54% came wanting to have this assessment, or like 52, or like 60, and I'm just like, is that enough am I comfortable with forcing 45% of residents on that road to up their taxes when they don't want to? And I'm just,
67 feels more like a supermajority.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's where I'm at. And I think other communities often do 60 or 67. So, I just want to see where council's at, because I'm kind of torn between that. So,
Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem Hutter.
I've had a couple of these come before us, and a supermajority to me is what, because when you're sitting there about to make this decision on behalf of people, it's significant. And it should be a supermajority. I don't know what that number, I don't know if that's 75%, frankly. Because typically the people in the percent who don't want it, they're in a position. They're in a financial position. Older people who are going to be selling their home and then this lien, like their lien's coming. They're not going to have 10 years of enjoying the paved road. They literally bear a greater burden. So it hits you like between the eyes, the unfairness. And so I think there had been, without even a specific policy, we kind of leaned into organically, well, we need to see a supermajority of this neighborhood wanting this. 2 or 3 times this has come. There's another road, I forget the name of it, where they came. And the folks that wanted it, it's understandable. The folks that didn't, super understandable. And so, yeah, I don't know what the percent is of supermajority. I don't, 67 because other communities did 67? Is that what?
Yeah, just kind of like, where is it?
Where is that?
2/3 of the people, it feels better than half, right?
Okay, all right. Yeah, I would add, for people who are going to sit in the chair making the decision, you need to feel like there's a preponderance of evidence that this entire neighborhood really, really wants this. Because if you don't, you will be making a very unfair decision. It just, that's the reality. And we report to the residents on this stuff, so.
So, another comment, how will the assessment, or how will the costs be distributed to the parcels? Will it be based on the lineal feet then? Okay. Is that what it is right now too? Is based on the lineal feet? Okay. So if one person has, 3/4 of the whole thing and wants to do it, they will get assessed 3/4 of the thing. So, okay, that's good.
Did you have something more?
Yeah. I just want to clarify something. We always seem to be just talking about pavement, but, and I'm going to need your help, Scott, to actually pave Middlesex, that area, what else do we need to do? Because paving is just one small portion, correct, of the project?
There's no storm sewer out there.
So is it fair to say that you can't have paved roads without storm sewers? You're gonna have to at least have swales there, right?
Well, you can't have good paved roads that are gonna last the 10, 15, 20 years of life that you're assessing somebody without proper drainage.
Okay, so I'm trying to get to my point though. Part of what we've done by practice though is the residents only had to pay for half of the actual pavement, not the overall project. So
No, they paid for all the pavement.
the pavement, including the base?
No, not the pavement, just the asphalt.
Just the asphalt.
So the regrading, the hauling the stuff out, the bringing the 8 inches of stone in, putting the storm sewers, the swales, the culverts, all that stuff was city cost. It was just the thickness of the asphalt for the road and for their driveway approaches.
So when we talk about these other communities that cover 40 to 50%, is that for everything or is that just for the pavement?
Correct,
For everything, okay. So I'd like to
So
match that.
that's why we kind of want to make this a policy, because we were kind of just myopic on just the pavement when
No, I
really
mean,
it's
yeah,
everything.
yeah,
Because
for-
I'm not, we don't have this problem, but other communities would need water and sanitary sewers down these streets potentially. I'm not saying we're at that point.
Just so I'm clear, that estimate that came from Middlesex, that included the stormwater. I mean, that wasn't,
Correct.
that was to do it the right way.
There's probably more now.
Hold on, I want to clarify. The project was overall, but the assessment was just for the pavement.
Yeah, the
Half of the
18
pavement.
Yeah, but the overall, the number we're dealing with.
The overall number
Whatever that
included
was
the
there.
paving and the storm.
Right, it included
2.8
everything.
million.
And the residents were only paying half of the actual paving proposed.
And 40% of them were upset about that. So,
The assessment.
yeah,
Yeah.
The assessments out there range from 8,000 to 29,000 at 18%, the overall cost. So if we're going to 50%, that means those are going to go to 20 to 75,000.
So based on people who have asked to do this, do you have an idea about what % of residents are interested in making this happen?
What was the percentage?
So based on the last one that was presented to council in January, we had 54%.
That showed interest?
54.17 that signed the petition.
Okay, that's the number of residents or number of homeowners, not
That was
necessarily.
based on the linear feet.
Or based on the linear feet.
So however we do the percent, we will do that same linear feet when we spread
Okay.
the assessment roll, the special assessment roll.
Yeah, I would agree, then we need to do something at least 67% as a threshold probably, because it sounds like a lot of people are not interested, but maybe once we give them the cost, I don't know what they had in mind, they might be thinking that increase their tax burden significantly, maybe not, maybe.
I'm a little, I blame myself because I said Middlesex first, but part of my issue with some of this whole meeting now in the sense, and the changing the policy in the middle of what these residents have thought the policy was and what they've worked so hard to do, is that we talked about it being unfair. It feels really unfair to move the goalposts in a sense for residents. We effectively moved those goalposts when we said no, even though they thought they had enough of a group to do it. I'm a little uneasy about saying, all right, we've made a new policy, now we need 7 out of 10 of you based on linear feet to agree to it, and it's gonna be this much more money because costs have gone up, and also, even if you come back to us with that, we still may say no. That leads to one of my other questions. I know there's gotta be some flexibility in this, economic tides change, cities can do all this, but 10 out of 10 people could come and say, we could still say no, right? And I'm just trying to find something that's going to create a little more, for lack of a better word, certainty with residents to understand where we're coming from, and also something that isn't, it feels a little unfair to me now to say, you said yes when you thought it was going to be $12,000. Now it's going to be $40,000, and we'll still maybe consider doing it, but it'll be another 5 years. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that, and I think part of the issue for me is that 3.3 miles, most of them are in that one little dense area in Middlesex, and so we're not really talking about that small section of Tucker. We're not really talking about what's going to be left of Willow Grove or some of the other more sporadically streets throughout the neighborhood.
But aren't we?
Well, we are, but yes and no. So in my mind, but those people on Lowry who haven't been coming to us and thinking they were going to get something from us based on the policy we had. So I'm trying to I understand from a budget standpoint, we're not in a position to put out even $1 million for new paving right now or we shouldn't, for Middlesex or for anyone unless it's absolutely necessary. I just don't know. I don't know how to wrap my head. Everything Councilmember Hamilton said, I agree those thresholds. If we're looking at it without the history of Middlesex coming to us a couple times, I think I'm pretty much where you are. It makes sense that we're looking at this as a brand new thing, but I think it's hard for me because I'm still dealing with the baggage of 3 times of Middlesex coming to us over the past 8.5 years.
But it hasn't only been Middlesex that's come.
It has for me. Tucker never came to me. That was before me.
Well, it wasn't Tucker, it was
Yeah.
a whole other street. Yeah, you had
Yeah, but that's part of Middlesex.
No, there was, here's the thing, 1978 is when this policy, such as it is, I was a freshman in high school.
I can beat that.
So, I know you can. I'm old, people. I'm probably old, I embrace my age. That's our policy the people of Middlesex should want us looking, everyone in the community should say, oh gee, this is something that needs to be updated. It's because these asks have come to us after years of not asking, by the way. There were no requests, that it became apparent we have a policy that's woefully out of date, inconsistent with the communities around us. Yes, there could be residents frustrated that we're changing the policy, but we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure our policies are updated, are practical, do make sense, are best practice. And honestly, I think with it updated, the likelihood of us saying yes or no isn't affected so much by the policy change, but by the number of people that do come to us and say, we were saying no with the old policy without even understanding how dated and weird it was, just based on the numbers. So I don't know if that helps you at all, but I think we need to take the specific roads out and recognize we're a city with a very dated policy, and what is the best practice that we can put forward, and then and update our ordinance accordingly. And yeah, might there be some fallout and some people, but we know if you put your fiduciary hat on that it's the right thing to do, right?
The current policy is we pay 18%, is that right?
Other way.
The other way.
They pay 18. We pay 82.
Is that the actual policy, or is that just what it worked out to on the
It's
last
what it
run?
works out to.
That's what it worked out to on that last estimate, yeah.
There's no policy.
There's no policy. Are you asking us to weigh in on an ordinance change, or, because you can do ad memos by yourself? I mean, you're just looking for our direction on what you want to put in policy until we can do an ordinance change, or?
Well, I'm sure both the city attorney and city manager will want to comment on this, but I think ultimately it needs to be in the ordinance, not a administrative memo by the city manager. It should be law of the city.
Yeah, that's part of the challenge, is that a city manager once upon a time wrote a memo that said 50%, and then 50% showed up, and somebody on the council said, well, I want 75%. So I think the council should adopt the policy of what that threshold is, not city management.
What was the change in 2013? Because the memo to us said there was something that was changed in 2013. Do you know? I thought that's what your memo had said.
I'd have to look at the ordinance. There's one section amended. But then on the flip side, that 6% is specifically in the ordinance. It's like hard coded.
Interest rate?
Yeah, which seems odd to
Makes
me.
no sense, yeah.
Right, yeah, because interest rates fluctuate. So, so we have, the charter and the code and these ad memos. And I think in the future state, it would be mostly in the code, because it's mostly city council saying this is our policy, what we're going to do within these parameters. And there would still be some administrative aspects that staff would have discretion over, but the rules of the road of what the city council policy is would be much more clear.
So what changed in 2013 was the engineering would send out a postcard to gauge interest from the residents. And we would do it every year, once a year when they were calling in. And Middlesex was calling in once a year. And we had so many complaints that were causing chaos in the neighborhood. Why are we sending it out every year? The neighbors are fighting. So we updated the policy to once every 3 years they can request to have the poll. That was the change, the ad memo change in 2013. Middlesex has been calling for 26 years that I've been here. They've been requesting it.
And every year it gets a
Smaller
little
and
bit more
smaller.
support.
And every year it's been getting larger. People that were against it when Bob Goslin was trying to coordinate it, they want it now. They said, well, if Bob wasn't behind it, we would have voted for it back then.
Way to bring in names there. Councilor Hamilton. Sorry, Chamberlain Franco.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to kind of echo what Mayor Pro Tem Hoodard just shared is that, and what you shared, Mayor. So I also, there's a part of me, I've been talking to these folks, and when we had that meeting, it ended with, maybe there's a way we could find something, we could find a way to make it work. And the thought of having this conversation and being able to, changing kind of how it's painful. I think what has opened my eyes is coming out of the advance and the past few advances and realizing we have some serious capital needs and we just don't have wiggle room. And I have communicated, when I talked to Mr. Fagan last, and I think it was November, December, must have been December after the last advance, I did sort of hint at, we're in a difficult position as a city. We just don't have a lot of wiggle room to come up with a couple extra million here or there for roads, believe it or not, despite what people think. And we're struggling as a city to figure out how we're gonna come up with the extra revenue that we need to do what our residents want us to do. And I think I'd rather us focus on updating the policy, creating a sense of clarity for the future, and then let's get to work of figuring out how do we find these resources, and maybe there is an answer down the road for Middlesex. But I do believe we need to update this, and I am all for 67. I'd almost do 70, but I think to be fair,
I think 75%.
I would do 75
If a neighborhood wants to bring it, so, I mean, I
of
don't
course I
know.
would do 75, but if we want, yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Sorry.
That might be,
Well,
yeah.
no, sorry, I didn't mean to cut in. Sorry. Well, I was just gonna say, the reason why I think 75% or the higher percentage makes sense is because they have to pay a lot of money. I mean, the more people that are okay with paying it, I think the better. I mean, that's the biggest reason why.
And it sounds like it's gonna be more now
Yes,
because we're increasing.
it's gonna be a lot of
share,
money.
Right?
Another quick little comment, if I may. I did have a resident also complaining that, and he, at the time, he wouldn't have been assessed. Under this, I'm not sure if he would be, but maybe not. He's very much against it. He still has to drive on the dirt roads, so there are residents who, and it's not necessarily the cost. There's other factors, so we have to remember there's residents who really also are angered by those prospects, so it's complex.
It's a good point. There are people who could afford it today,
Yeah.
but like the nature of it and the feel of it.
Right.
And that's why they moved there. We've heard that. right?
I was the city manager of Birmingham for 3 years, where arguably everybody could afford the special assessment. And they were talked about frequently, and not a single one was done in 3 years, for a variety of reasons, but.
There's other reasons beside the money, is
Yeah.
the point. Yeah. I'll let Mr. Harak and then.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, like, part of the policy determination, I mean, you were talking about the threshold to determine how many people needs to approve, but also what percentage the city pays, is that's also going to be decided, right? I mean, that's
Right.
Okay, so because the number of people that supports it probably will depend on that. I mean, once you get your tax bill, that, and I guess I don't know if 40% looks right, 50% looks right, but I don't have any data to show what is fair. I mean, I guess that's what you were coming, Mayor Baker, yeah. That they think they're paying only 18%, and if you're going to tell them you have to pay 50%, that is, probably comes as a shocker. And then
By the way, the costs have gone up since that last.
gone up, yeah. I know. So that is something I didn't think about. I thought they were always thinking, they're paying 50%.
Yeah, I mean, the fundamental issue is that we have a 6-year capital plan, a 6-year roads plan that our engineering staff meticulously goes through every year to plan out how we can distribute these dollars every year in the best way to benefit the most residents. And when these special assessment districts come in, it's kind of trying to bump that project ahead of those others. And so when their residents would only pay 18% of it, that I can't view that as fair, as like, because other projects are gonna lose that, you know? But if it's a 50-50 split, I think that is worth it for us to maybe to bump that project forward, if the residents are willing to put that forward.
Especially if we issue the bonds.
Yes, yes, because then it won't, dip into our fund balances. So, to me, I think 50-50 is where we have to go. And I know the residents saw the previous policy, saw what they thought they were gonna have to pay, and now it's gonna be more, but if they want us to agree to it, that's what it's gonna take, because money going to this project is money not going to another project. It's not going to another neighborhood that needs it too,
And
so.
we're also still could say no.
Yes.
We're never gonna put in the policy that they automatically get it.
Good.
if
Right.
they bring the petition, right? I mean, that's the thing. So, I mean, and there's never gonna be a time where it's more important, absent an emergency, for us to pave Middlesex versus fix Rochester Road, North Road, right? I mean, like, that's the reality, right?
Yeah, I mean, we got Stevenson and Rochester
There's
coming up,
never
those are
gonna be
big
that.
ones, yeah.
that
All
problem.
fairness, the property values are going up. I mean, it's like, I probably wouldn't buy a house if the road is not paved. If they pave the road, I'll go and buy, I mean, I'll pay more money. I mean, so it is not completely unfair. I mean, we are doing value added to their property, right? I mean, so it is other way of looking at it. So.
Well, it depends on your perspective, because we have people living on these gravel roads who are horrified at the prospect of paving
But
it
that
and
is-
changing the character, and they feel like the value of their home is higher
No.
because it feels different,
Okay.
it's quieter, they're more in an up, I'm talking in their terms, so, and, you know, that kind of on paper, or when you're just having a conversation, you're like, what now? But then when you go to the street, you get it. There is a different feel
Feels like that, yeah.
to, so, and so and it is sad because neighbors do then kind of get pitted against one another, debating about, frankly, their quality of life and what they think is valuable character. But they will argue that it, you know, they're investing in their homes because it has this remote feel. So
Yeah, that is true.
it's kind of.
I agree. When they bought the house, they probably wanted that, right? So,
Right.
so that is, I agree with that too. Yeah.
And when they built the house, they didn't pay for the road, where like a lot of, the newer neighborhoods, part of the cost that the people who are moving in paying for those houses is paying for those roads, and the people in that neighborhood never paid that cost. So in a sense, and they're paying it now if they get it paid now. So that's one factor when you talk about.
In effect, that started in 1968 with the adoption of the Subdivision Control Act, because before that, plats were created and the improvements weren't assured that they were installed. And then with that Subdivision Control Act, is it required that all the improvements be put in before the final plat was created. Because it was common in the old days to have plats without roads and water.
Can I ask a question that's tax and assessment related that may sound more, I'm not sure how it's gonna land. Just so we pave roads and create a special assessment. We have to increase the value of their assessable value, so they're gonna pay more regular property taxes, plus they're gonna pay the special
No, because
assessment?
that's not considered new on the taxable value. It would just
Okay.
be an increase in the total true cash value.
Okay, it doesn't increase their
Correct.
property taxes in the process as
Right,
well?
it'll increase
Okay.
their value.
So only when they sell it, well,
How much value does it add? That's a paved road.
So we have to do an
1%,
appraisal
5%?
beforehand and an appraisal afterwards.
Good.
Probably 5%.
I mean, if they sell it statistically, they'll get more money. Most people like paved roads, right? So, but I understand if people may not want to sell the house, they may want to live there forever, and that. But I think what Councilmember Rodrick was saying, they may not like that. So
Right, it's weird.
And I wonder the people who didn't sign the petition in Middlesex, for example. I'm sure the city attorney loves when we talk about specific neighborhoods so much. But I wonder how many of them didn't sign because purely they couldn't afford it or didn't want to, but they would like to have the paved roads. You just never know. And same on the people who signed it. I guess you could ask them. It's not that many of them, but I don't know where everybody is. I mean, I've kind of heard sort of where we're at. It seems like we need to change the policy. We agree with that. Somewhere in the 50%, it should be their share. I don't know why communities, Rochester Hills and the other one, they charge 1% above what the actual bond interest rate is. Is that just for them, for administrative fees?
Yes, I would assume so.
Okay, I don't think that's unreasonable. The petition stuff does concern me. Honestly, the more the better. I really do feel that way. It makes our job easier, whoever's sitting at the table, because I think the first Middlesex one that was just Sussex, just half of it, it was like 50.1% or something they came, right? And it was really like, well, that didn't, but it is nice when it's more it's pretty obvious.
yeah, I'm totally comfortable with 75. if we want to go there. I mean,
Mark's laughing. I mean, is
No,
that?
I know. I mean, is anyone going to actually do it? But I mean, I think it's
But maybe-
fair, yeah.
Problem with it.
But maybe that says to residents who are really fired up about this, okay, well, these are the new parameters, and if you can get 75% of, lineal feet frontage people to sign, Kelly.
It could be like, if you got 75%, at that point, we'll submit it to city council, just so they don't think if you get 75%, we're gonna approve it.
Right.
Well, that, right, no, it has to be that, right, which is the whole other, like,
In order to be submitted to city council, a minimum of 67% of signatures have to be obtained.
and I think that language in whatever policy, however that could be done, that kind
Yeah.
of softer language needs to be clear, because some of them came to that meeting saying, well, wait a minute, we did what we were supposed to, and now
Right.
you're telling us no, right? Some of that's education, but if we can help.
But also, we didn't have a clear, ordinance level policy, so I can't really blame them for not,
We were all twisted, all of us.
Right.
We're twisted.
Ideally, we'll create a nice little brochure that explains the new procedure once it's established. I think in the agenda packet, we included Rochester Hills as an example, because the city engineer likes the I think we all think, oh, that's pretty good policy. We could just find and replace Rochester Hills with Troy.
Don't tell Brian Barnett.
Now, here's a weird question. Is this only apply to paving dirt roads, or if a neighborhood had a really bad road and they wanted to jump to the head of the line, could they do this? I don't think they would, but it's just a random thought, We have our 6-year plan for how we repair our currently paved roads, but maybe some people would want to jump ahead of that. Is it really open to anything like that, or only for that? I don't think anyone would do that, but I'm just curious.
Well, in townships, it's common for people to have to do a special assessment.
This is what I'm
to repave the roads, but to jump in front of the line in Troy, I don't know. I mean, you just don't
If
know.
the neighborhood pays for half of it, that would do it, but yeah.
Yeah, that would pit neighborhoods against.
I think we do a pretty good job, spreading around how we do the local roads, so.
I was just wondering, does this only apply to roads or sidewalks as well, or just the roads?
Well, our other SAD, we charge 100% of the cost to the residents. So
Percent.
sanitary, water, sidewalk, storm sewers, if they wanted to do, we always just charge 100%. There haven't been any of those that have come forward. The last sanitary SADs were the ones out in Charnwood. And we couldn't get the sanitary SAD enough approval, so that's when council revised policy, changed the ordinance. You're not required to connect the sanitary sewers until you need it, and the city put it in via benefit fee instead of the SAD. And then we re-chip sealed the roads out there, and they haven't been back for paving SAD since. So we did the same policies. We put sewers everywhere that they weren't, that we didn't need easements or right-of-ways. So we haven't done an SAD for water and sanitary for quite a while. And the sidewalks, because you never get enough in favor of it to go down somebody's street and have somebody on both sides of the streets pay for it. And that's only on one side that you've got to shovel and maintain it, so I can walk across the street and go on your sidewalk. It just doesn't happen.
So the homeowners pay 100% of that?
It's been our policy.
They pay 100% for repair and replacement for sidewalks, right? No? You're saying no, you're saying yes.
If it's not related to city's infrastructure, so
Right.
a tree, a manhole, the resident's responsible for the financial.
Right,
burden
if it's
of
not
it.
related to a
Yes,
city.
It's not related to any city infrastructure.
Okay, so.
Is there, what direction does city man, we haven't really picked a number, kind of have. I mean, we did.
Yeah, I'll say 75%, 50%, and then 1% over interest rates.
Yeah.
Bond is an option, yeah.
No more than a 20-year term, but.
Yep, but it's case by
useful
case.
life is left.
Yep.
Three parameters, right?
And of course, this is just direction,
And that will be an ordinance change?
That's
an
probably preferable, yes, to have it in the ordinance, it's preferable, and there are, it is cleaner, and so yes, certainly we can modify the ordinance, bring it to you for your consideration.
Yeah, to residents listening in those neighborhoods, no decision is made. This is just direction for staff to bring to us an ordinance where later we'll have a public hearing on, to vote on and discuss and deliberate on. So
One of the things that was in the policy in the past was that if somebody met the income requirements for CDBG funds, that the city just paid those costs. I don't know if that's something that you want to be considered into this policy or not.
I like that policy. I don't think that's a bad policy, but I don't know.
So, but you're not saying that the federal dollars are paying for it, you say the city dollars are paying for it? I don't know if that's legal.
Well, that's the policy, that's what's been done in the past. The assessment to the homeowner just disappeared if they met the income requirements, because bidding the job with all the federal requirements and bringing the county in and doing the wage interviews and all that stuff was more expensive to the project than the one benefit for the one homeowner that was getting their assessment paid.
So the city just didn't charge it for that? That probably sounds not good.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like a good, I mean, it sounds like it might have run afoul of something, right? That might-
The more you learn about the way we used to do things, the less you'll like
They
it.
had to go through that policy, you know, if they qualify for the CDBG funds, then the city paid their assessment.
Yeah, Kelly?
Just on a different note, through the Middlesex one, we actually had people calling outside of the district that said, we don't want this, because it's gonna increase traffic in our area now. So taking it to 75%, I think would benefit more people within the city. Because there's also other people to consider besides the people that are actually in the district. They're like, we don't want to increase traffic because now that's a paved road, people will cut through. It's a dirt road, no one cuts through ever.
I have a question that doesn't have to be answered right now, but back, CDBG or not, are there provisions anywhere that limit what we can do with special assessments for people at certain poverty level? I mean, is there anything that you're aware of? You don't have to answer now if you don't know. I'm just curious if that automatically comes in by state law or something like that, that would, I mean, if somebody, I guess if they have their house asset.
There's an actual special assessment deferment program that they can defer payments and interest on it if they qualify.
If they qualify, okay, that's all I need to know.
It's a deferment.
Because I would imagine there's some fixed income people who truly are, what comes in goes out each month for their care, and an increase in this could make it difficult for them.
That's something we could look at when we develop the.
Sure, I didn't
packet
see
formula.
that in the comparative municipalities that I was looking at, that wasn't specified in those ordinances.
I can get you information on that.
Okay, yep.
From a maintenance standpoint, I think it would be good to include the boundaries of the special assessment, so we won't consider half a road. It have to be a full road to qualify. We saw that at Middlesex where they wanted to do only a portion of the road. And when we start doing portions, it gets really difficult to maintain, especially if it's the middle of the road. You have gravel, pavement, gravel.
Yeah.
I think Middlesex, they tried just half of the, I don't think that should be allowed. If we're making an ordinance, I mean.
No half roads.
Yeah, it should, I thought you meant just like half directionally.
No.
Why you laugh? I mean, what, like the half works both ways, everybody.
It would just be consistent pavement, that you couldn't leave gaps in pavement, so.
Right.
We recently kind of did that on the Clausen border, where they didn't have money to do the road. We did it.
Elmwood, the Elmwood project, yeah.
Yeah, we prepaid it so it'd be a full road, and hopefully they followed through and paid us back.
Yeah, hopefully.
So when will this come back to us? I say that because the residents are gonna wanna know, for their clarity, and I'm just curious anyway. I mean, I know there's a lot going on. But any thoughts?
I think that we have some good direction, something we can start working on. I don't know, maybe.
Is this an ordinance that your office is drafting?
Well, I'm guessing that it will be started. We'll work with, we'll work with city management.
We haven't started an ordinance yet, though. I don't know, I think council will need to get past through the budget and manager election, or do you want to have this soon?
I don't see it, I don't think it's priority number one, to be honest, even though we scheduled this meeting faster than anything I've ever seen scheduled, but, absent one time in 2018. But Bob got that. I don't want to wait till fall to where it's another season of grading the road? I mean, where the people are gonna be thinking about it, I mean, right now is the time of year anyway, they're probably noticing the road, so. And if anyone from that neighborhood, who should we direct to speak to in city administration to talk about this?
Matt?
Okay. Well, you'll speak.
I
before
mean,
you-
most of the residents call the engineering department right now and get some direction over there.
Okay. But, all right, anything else? No other business, all right, we're adjourned.